Hello, my Nerdy-Nawg-dawgs. This is your video helper for week 9 hot topic. This week we're talking about setting. Why setting? Because great writers paint such a picture for their readers that they can really identify what is happening and see the picture in their head. So, for hot topic this week, you need to choose a book, any novel that you have already read, and find excerpts from the book that help identify the setting. Now, the setting can be answered in many different ways, and today we took notes by including where did it take place? When did it happen? What is the weather like? Authors love to include the weather because it helps paint that picture of where your character is. This is a big one. What are the social conditions? Basically, what is happening? So that can include an action, because an action might help identify what the setting is and what's happening. We're going to talk about that. What does the landscape look like? Great authors really describe the landscape because it paints the picture, and that can be the landscape of an office. Or it could be the landscape outside of the mountain range, right? Because that adds to our story, adds to our picture in our head. And then what sort of special details might they have added? So this week, I'm going to detail and help you with this with Hatchet. Wonderful book. You'll read that in 6th grade. Chapter 5, though, see if you can identify the setting of this book by answering some of these questions. So here we go, chapter 5. His eyes snapped open, hammered open, and there were these things about himself that he knew. Instantly, he was unbelievably, viciously thirsty. His mouth was dry and tasted foul and sticky. His lips were cracked and felt as if they were bleeding. And if he did not drink some water soon, he felt that he would wither up and die. Lots of water, all the water he could find. He knew the thirst and felt the burn on his face. It was mid-afternoon, and the sun had come over him and cooked him while he slept, and his face was on fire. He stood, using the tree to pull himself up because there was still some pain and much stiffness, and he looked down at the lake. Okay, so how does that add to our narrative on setting? So this author did an amazing job, and here's some of what we saw, right? If we talk about when did it take place? Well, he identified that pretty clearly, and he said mid-afternoon, right? We don't have a year or a date, but he did say mid-afternoon. Oh, in terms of where that took place, that would have been more. When did it happen? So mid-afternoon. We don't have an exact location. The author doesn't describe that. But he does say, what is the weather like? Well, he talks about the sun, and he says the blistering hot sun, right? So that gives us a picture of a really warm climate. He does actually mention some of the landscape, just a little bit of what it might look like. He mentions a tree standing up by the tree, and he mentions a lake. So those are some details we can take from the setup of this chapter. But here's what really stood out in terms of social condition. Although some of this is action, it adds to the setting. It really details what's happening. What does he say? That his lips are cracked, almost bleeding, that he's thirsty, viciously thirsty. So that kind of goes toward the social condition. This kid is thirsty. No question, he's thirsty, right? So those are some of the key details that we can answer that add to the setting. Now, another thing that this author did so amazingly well is the word choice. So what special details can add to our setting or add to us identifying and picturing the setting in our head? These vivid verbs they used. Blistering, the sun cooked him while he slept. He felt it burn on his face. He talks about the foul and sticky mouth and or dry taste in his mouth. Lips were cracked and bleeding. So all of that adds to this condition, social condition of what's happening to help us identify the setting. That's what you need to do this week, Nerdy-Nawg-dawgs.